started. I think that's just about universal, honestly. I don't know if you guys pay attention. Before we get started, I just got to gush on the screenshot. This is just a completely unedited screenshot. I recently was able to start screwing around with DayZ on the 1080 that NVIDIA just put out. This is 4K, absolutely maxed out. No anti-aliasing, obviously, because you don't need it at 4K. But, yeah, I was holding a solid about 70 frames in Cherno, which is like our busiest city, and about 100 to 120 outside of it. I mean, you got to have a 4K display, which I realize not everybody does have, but holy shit, I was having an amazing time. Okay, so we're just going to go ahead and get into it, and hopefully stream's good to go, guys? Because I might get yelled at if it's not. Okay, all right. All right, so I'm going to subject you guys to PowerPoint. I know I'm kind of notorious for that at this point, but I do have media in here, so, you know, moving stuff and such. We're going to, I realize the panel is called 0.60. It's mostly because when we submitted the panel, we hadn't released 0.60 yet. It's out. So I'll talk briefly about it, but mostly focus on the next build, 0.61. Because, I mean, there's no point in me talking about what's already on Stable Branch. So really quickly, 0.60 hit June 15th, if I recall correctly, which was just about a couple weeks ago. Since then, we've exceeded over 500,000 unique players coming in to try the build, which is about 200,000 over our average. Usually we sit around 300,000 uniques inside of a month, and it definitely spiked. This build, 0.60, for us is kind of the first large push of new Infusion Engine technology to replace the old real virtuality that we started with from Take On Helicopters. And everybody's biggest complaint about that, as you can see here, was frames. My FPS is horrible, et cetera, et cetera. I tried to get a mix in here between reasonable people and fuck you people. So our goals for 0.60 were obviously the renderer being implemented. Randomized attachments on weapons that spawn. You know, like your M4 could have, I don't know, it could have a magazine, it could have an optic. It's not the vanilla M4 that always spawns. And that carried on to any weapon that had an attachment. And we tried to pass that on to, as well, any weapon that had a magazine. Now, right now, for 0.60, we weren't able to get internal magazine weapons potentially spawning with ammo, like, what would the example be? The repeater. A repeater has its own internal magazine. There's no clip you find to load. You just find bullets, right? We haven't got that spawning, those types of weapons spawning with randomized ammo in them yet, but it is a goal. Random items like in cargo. So if you're running around Chernarus looking for food and you can't find anything, the idea being is that look in the clothes and boxes and whatever you might find, because there could be, like backpacks, there could be stuff inside them. So bullets, food, tools, whatever the case may be. It just adds another layer to running around and looking for your loot. It's not all initially visible. It could also be inside that shirt you find. The new reload mechanics were something we also tried with 0.60, which is moving away from the whole traditional FPS/ARMA kind of mechanic of hit R to reload if you have a magazine. And we wanted to move away from that so that we could move into more advanced type handling of how weapons operate. So moving to actually manipulating what's in the chamber. So we could do jamming later on and having to clear that. And of course, Russian roulette if you have a revolver, which was something Peter was excited about. And of course, upping the players per instance from 50 to 60, because I mean, why not? It's 0.60. It seemed to work, so let's do it. 60 frames, 60 players, 0.60. All right, I'm going to mute this while I talk over because it's just going to be loud. This is just a general, the footage we used at the PC Gaming Show to talk about 0.60. And I'll just leave that up there talking while I cover some of the stuff that we accomplished. Now, obviously, 0.60 also included us moving away from the old legacy user interface, so the old inventory system and such. That's all completely gone now. Starting to move over into the initial layout of the new main menu. You saw back there. I'll back up just really quick. You saw back here the corner up here, no stats connected. We're trying to move eventually towards a more this is your story-centric stuff. So the main menu should reflect what you have done, what you have accomplished Your character's statistics will be tracked via the game related to the character that's on screen. So how long you've survived, distances you've traveled, actions you've performed that are notable, all saved up there so that while you're on the main menu later on, you'll be able to scroll through the active characters you have on the public hive and see this guy's been alive for X number of days, killed this many infected, saved this many survivors. Although, realistically, a lot of you guys are just going to care about how many people you've killed, but I'm not gonna reinforce that behavior because that's bad. Aside from that, as I talked earlier about the whole frames thing up there, FPS being a big concern for people on the old technology, and I mean it really was. I guess I personally was a little bit in a bit of a, you could call it a tech bubble. I obviously I ran a decent machine and I played it nearly every day. I think I just crossed 6,000 hours, so it was a little difficult for me to see that kind of stuff. With 0.60 and moving to Infusion's render, moving to DirectX 11 away from DirectX 9 and the old DirectX 7 calls, the performance increase has been, honestly, it's been more than I expected. I was very in the videos we put out on our YouTube channel, I wanted to stay very middle of the road and show what I expected people in kind of a common case scenario to run into, which was a 30% frame rate increase. And the reaction that we've got from most all of the community has been significantly beyond that. So if you haven't taken a look at DayZ recently because of your performance, your client-side performance, I would encourage you to take another look if you have it and see how it's running. Because I mean, on this example right here, this was a 760, a GTX 760, and it was running everything maxed. And it's kind of hard to see on that screen up there. We're running on this specific video, we're in the Steam FPS overlay. But he's in Cherno, which has recently been remodeled and is a massive city now. And it's very complex, and he's holding somewhere between 50 to 70 frames. I wouldn't have been able to be done at ultra settings in the old technology, not at all. So, I'm killing zombies in the rain. I don't know if you guys have probably seen this. I was personally just freaking out about it because mostly the volumetric fog, the new rain effects on the coast. You combine those and you have kind of almost a traumatic storm. It's very easy in bad weather conditions on the coast to not be able to see what's 100 meters in front of you. And that, since it's height based, you can just you head inland, you go at a higher elevation, and that fog dissipates. So it's mostly along the coast because it's so close to the sea level. It's at sea level. All right, enough about 0.60. It's awesome. Frame rate increase is huge, and it's a step in the right direction. But let's talk about 0.61, which is what we're doing next. We have the server login queue as one of our first goals. That probably would have been pushed to a little bit later, but when 0.60 hit experimental branch, the overwhelming demand of, I think we were looking at about 196,000 people trying to cram into 2,000 player slots, it became pretty clear that we're going to need to bump the server login queue up. For those that don't follow Bohemia specifically, we also put out a title called Arma 3, and they recently did, besides the Apex update that they're looking to do on the 11th of, is it July yet? Sorry, time zones, guys, it's really messing with me. The 11th of this month, Apex is coming out. That's it's a huge DLC for the Arma team. But prior to working on Apex, they're working on Eden, which is out on their servers right now, and they did a huge update to the base audio engine for Arma, massive. And since it's the same company, and a lot of the folks on both teams have been in the company for upwards of 10 to 15 years, it was very, very easy for them to reach out to us and say, hey, we know you're working on your own audio engine. It's probably going to take you some time. Why don't we go ahead and move over what we have on Arma? We took a look, and it was fantastic. So that's one of our goals for 0.61. And that includes completely redoing all of our weapon sounds, because the old method, the old technology that we inherited from Take on Helicopters required a lot of, you could say, dev hacks, so to speak, a lot of duct tape to get it to do what we wanted it to do, to make things sound the way we wanted it to sound. It didn't really have as rich of rich of an option on the configuration level for sounds, as well as things like filters and so on and so forth. So we had to go through, once we move over this new Eden audio tech, we're going to have to update all of our gun sounds. We're also going to do our footsteps or ambient sounds. It's a big update. For 0.61, we're focusing just on the weapon sounds. That'll be the most visible change for people. And the dynamic spawning of infected. So I think I might hit this on a later slide, but I'm just going to go ahead and talk about it right now. For those that play DayZ mod, it might seem, if you look back at those memories, that DayZ mod had more zombies. But the reality is it didn't. It was a very creative way that Dean and the DayZ mod team used triggers to create, in the same way the loot was spawned, to create effectively a player would hit this trigger when it neared a structure that was configured to spawn infected, and it would spawn the infected. The rest of the map did not have it, and they're only going to spawn if players are there. And out the gate, that was, besides the fact that we inherited nothing other than ideas from DayZ mod, out the gate we wanted to get rid of that meta game where you pull up your binoculars, you look at a town, I don't see any infected, there's no players. It was way too meta gamey. And we also needed something that was a lot more robust, because we couldn't just rely on an old adapted way to use triggers from an Arma 2 mod. So for DayZ, if you look at DayZ mod, back in its I'd call it its peak, when the decision was made to make a standalone game, a peak amount of zombies on a server might be somewhere between 400 to 500, and that's packed. That's players in the big cities triggering these things, right? And out the gate, when we launched DayZ, I think we came out with 1,000, and that spawned globally. That's across all the map, regardless of where the players are. So obviously, it's going to spread it a lot thinner. It's going to remove the metagamey, but it's also going to seem like there's less zombies. Now we've backed up and down based upon server performance on builds. Some had 700, some had 500, but they are spawned globally regardless of the player. And one of the things we wanted to look at once we started using our zone generation tool for the economy, it also handles things like dynamic events like helicopter crashes and so on and so forth. We looked at it, we said, we can use this in addition to the global spawning to create hotspots. We don't support triggers anymore, but with this tool that plugs into the central economy, we can actually configure areas rather than buildings. We can configure whole areas for a minimum and a maximum and so on and so forth. I'll talk a little bit about this later on in the presentation, but the idea was to take the global, and we salt zombies across the map, and then create these hotspots within the zone generation tool that when players come into this radius, they have a chance of spawning between a minimum and a maximum of certain infected, and they can clear it out. There's a restock timer. Again, I'll go into that later on. And predators. And specifically, we want to do more predators, but for 0.61, we're focusing on wolves specifically and how that would operate within the forests of Chernarus. So the server login queue, a big thing for us is that without the server login queue, when you're hammering the servers, like if for those that might have participated in 0.60 experimental, people spamming that server, it actually is impacting the server performance. It has to effectively respond to those players, and the players that are joining that might back out, that's dipping server performance. So actually setting up a proper system so players are kept in that queue and not impacting the server was huge. Obviously, there's going to be a UI element, so you guys know where you are in the queue. It's important, rather than just knowing I am in the queue, what my number is. And the queue size and capacity on the server can be configured by the server operator. So if you're running your own server and you don't want to have like a max 5,000 queue or something, or you just want like 10, 20, whatever the case may be, you can configure that in the server config. So the audio engine update. Again, it's entirely thanks to the Army guys reaching out to us and saying, hey, we've got this awesome thing we're pushing. We think we can help you out with it. And again, it offers a lot more control over how the audio is configured on our end. We can do a lot more stuff with it. Attenuation curves, distance attenuation curves, filters. Honestly, the list is extensive. The Army guys wrote up a little bit about it on their side, and we'll probably have our audio designer go in detail on it. But it essentially, for our poor audio designer, takes his job with a small toolbox and a lot of duct tape and gives him just a significantly more robust option. He's got so much more he can work with to create the kind of ambience and effect that we want with DayZ. And yeah, like I said earlier, it's a massive upgrade from the old days of real virtuality. And again, the initial implementation is going to be focusing on our existing firearms, the ones we have in game already. They all have to be redone. And here in a bit, I'm going to show you an example of one weapon that has been set up. We're gonna go ahead and start right here. This is the MP5, and this is at 500 meters. So this is what it sounds like 500 meters away from the shot. I'm gonna wait until that door closes so you guys can hear it because it might not be loud. It's a good distance away. All right. This damn mouse hates me. Did everybody hear that? I could turn that up if you didn't. All right. And the next one is 200 meters. And then we have, I believe, 30 meters. And guys, right there in the field. And this, in addition to the obvious distance attenuation there, it also allows us to do actual proper tails on the firearms. Because the way we did it before was very, very hackneyed. It was very kind of, smoke and mirrors. There's proper tails done on these firearms now. And poor Andre, our audio designer, has to go through every firearm we currently have in DayZ to do that. I wanted to show you guys an SKS, but we couldn't get it functioning in time for RTX. But as development goes on towards 0.60 or 0.61, we'll start putting some examples of these on the YouTube channel so you guys can see more. The dynamic spawning for the infected. Again, as I spoke, DayZ Mod used triggers. A building or an area would have a trigger set upon it. You enter it, it spawns the infected, and so on and so forth. And that's how it was all done. I hit all this already. So the areas within the zone generation tool, which I'll show you an example of real soon, we can configure a minimum and a maximum per player, a minimum and a maximum for the area. So as more players enter the area, more infected will show up. A lot of people were concerned when we spoke about this initially on the forums about it still creating that metagamey thing. And the more I thought about this, and I hate to reference pop culture, but I'm assuming everybody here has watched The Walking Dead, right? The zombies in The Walking Dead are obviously moving towards something that got their attention, right? Usually it's people. So you see large amounts of zombies show up. They're not there for the hell of it. We already have the global spawn. Logic dictates that as players start to come around one central area and make noise and do stuff, they're going to attract more. So the more I thought about this, the less I thought that as long as we set the distance somewhere within the network bubble, which is about 1,000 meters, you shouldn't see the actual infected spawning. It should occur, for the most part, outside of your visual range. And as long as we can tackle the sleep state on the infected, which I believe on 0.60 it might still be there, where if you're not within a certain area, the infected are in a sleep state, which is very visible. If we can keep them animated in that sleep state, roaming around, it shouldn't be too visible to you guys, unless you're seeing angry zombies. And obviously angry zombies equals players. So personally, I'm excited about this. Honestly, I'm really excited about this because let's take an example, the Northwest Airfield. Let's say we configure that so that every player can, let's say can spawn a minimum of 1 and a maximum of 5, right? And the Northwest Airfield is a hotspot, so the more players you get in there, we could potentially see, hopefully, if the servers agree with it, the server performance agrees with it, and we could see for, 2 squads of players, we could see 40, 50 zombies in that area, angry at them. It could, if configured right, create a balance between having to worry about that other squad of players up at the Northwest Airfield and having to worry about managing those groups of infected that are clearly coming for you and keeping them off you. I had a bit of a jet lag coming into the States, and I spent last night listening to a group of Australian kids on Twitch. I think I had like 2 viewers at the time, but it was a group of 4 or 5 of them up at the Northwest Airfield dealing with just that. They ran into several squads, and then they started pulling zombie aggro. And it went really quickly from a group of teenage kids having a good time cracking jokes over TeamSpeak to them screaming at each other, telling each other, "Shut up, shut up, shut up! I can't hear what's going on." And another guy screaming about, "Oh, I'm so close to being dead. Somebody please give me a bandage, give me a saline bag." That kind of hectic combat in a high risk, high reward area is exactly what I was hoping for. And so I didn't get much sleep, honestly, listening to that. And again, yeah, a restock or a respawn value in the same way that rare items in 0.60 function, like the M4, the SVD, they have a fairly high restock timer, meaning that between the spawning of a SVD and the respawning of an SVD on the server, there has to be an X amount of time. You can't just pick it up and take it and hope another one's going to spawn. The server has to count time between that so that you can't farm those things. We can do the same thing with the dynamic spawning the infected. We can assign a respawn timer so that players can clear an area out safely before they proceed in, whether it be a town or an area like the Northwest Airfield. And really quickly, just to give you an example of what the designers work with, this is an earlier iteration, but this is the zone generation tool. They can paint effectively areas you see around here as a small village or a large area, so it can spawn more. They have options over here for quantity, the territory range of the infected, and so on and so forth. And this is one of those tools that will also be made available to mod authors should they choose to mod on that side of the fence. Wolves. This is going to be our first implementation of Predator AI. It's going to be interesting to see how it works, how it adapts to survivors in Chernarus. Wolves should operate in a pack. They are pack animals, and their psychology is designed to operate around that. And you'll see an example of what I mean about that. The saturation and population of exactly how many of them are across the map will need to be scaled as we move forward, because obviously server performance is a big concern at all times. It has to be at a playable level, and we're not to that point where myself or the team are happy with the server performance. It's an ongoing battle, but as we gain more, call it performance budget on each server, then we can start increasing the saturation of infected, of predators, of players. Because I firmly believe that 75 players is a minimum for Chernarus. It's too damn big. All right, so again, as I said, we need to slowly increase, and that server performance is a constant focus for us. All right, I don't want anybody judging how this poor developer handles these wolves. It's a developer. He's not as good as the rest of you guys. He spends his day working on the game. This is an example of one of the developers, Josef, I believe, put this together in Bratislava, in our Slovakia team, who are focusing mostly on this, engaging a pack of wolves. And that's not how you do that slide. All right. By the way, the M4 is not configured for the new sound, so it's just going to sound, not yet, it's going to sound as it does on 0.60. I really like how the remaining wolves just said nope and left. We have some more examples of this that I can show later on if you guys want to see. He uses an axe, he uses a revolver. But this is the current early stage that we're at right now. This is what we want these wolves, and maybe operate a little more viscerally, are one of our goals for 0.61, as I said. Before we get into any questions, there was a couple of things I wanted to helm really quickly that I was talking to right before I left for RTX with Peter, our lead designer. We've talked about a lot of new weapons coming out, the M249 squad automatic weapon, the PKM. I always get the PKM and the RPK mixed up. The PKM, the Groza, the Scout, We have a decent backlog of new weapon models coming, but don't expect them for .61. The issue here is that all of our existing firearms, all their animations and mechanics have to be redone for this new animation system and new player controller that we're working on. So we have to go through, have the animators pretty much redo everything we have functioning right now, get that in, and then we can start looking at putting in these new weapons. I just wanted to make sure nobody got too excited about that. And to keep in mind that the player controller and the animation system are very much married. Can't have one without the other. So the update for that will include both of them, and we'll have to include all of the new animations for the weapons function as well. That's not a small undertaking. I don't know if you guys have followed me talking about the new player controller and fluid user actions and how that's going to operate. I know a lot of people have debated whether or not the new renderer or the new player controller were a bigger impact on DayZ. I cannot stress enough to you guys how much of a game changer having actual fluid user actions in the world is for DayZ. I mean, you guys know you start something and you're pretty much locked into it. I mean, you can cancel action, but you're pretty much locked into it, right? You want to eat something, you want to bandage, so on and so forth. You have to stop to do that, right? With the exception of reloading, which is kind of actually is, again, example of dev hacks right there, the way we do that. The new user actions will allow for proper blending. So we're talking about, in addition to something as simple as being able to eat a can while you're walking, we're looking at, actually making how the system tracks your initiation of that action and completion based upon the time used. So I guess the easiest way for me to give an example of this would be if this was a glass of water here, right? So on the legacy system, if I want to drink this glass of water, I have drink or drink all, right? Drink is a single drink, drink all is to empty the canteen. And that's it. You initiate the animation, and you don't get a success from it if you cancel it so you can move. It's 1 or 0 or 1, really. It's success or failure. That's it. With the new system, with the new user actions, it's set up so that when I take this drink from this glass, it's counting how long I'm performing this action, right? It's not a start animation, end animation, you're done. I start to drink, I release the key, and the game actually knows, okay, he's consumed 3 seconds worth of fluid, and you go. There's no more start the animation, and it's only a successful if you finished it. It's entirely calculated based upon the time that you're doing it, which I think is massive. I really think it touches all areas of DayZ gameplay, honestly. So are we set up, guys, Guardians, for questions? Or did I just throw that at you at the last minute? Outstanding. Or am I using the wireless mic?
You are using the wireless mic.
Can I use this
Go
one?
ahead and grab that one. All right. Take this one from you.
Perfect.
Does anybody have any questions?
All right. What's the future of VR with DayZ?
Amusingly, I was talking with Dean about VR right before I left. We were talking about Out of Ammo, his new VR title. I will say I don't want to commit to anything because we really haven't looked into it too much. We do have a good relationship with Oculus, and we have for a while, and it's been in the back of my mind. Obviously, the Vive is becoming more of consumer focus as well lately, and we're a Steam title, so we have a good relationship there. But really, in the end, a decision needs to be made on our end. We need to sit down with both Valve and we need to sit down with Oculus and find out exactly what they're going to need from us performance-wise for a fluid experience. I don't want people vomiting, and if we can pull it off and we have the time and budget, then implementing it shouldn't be that much of an issue. I've already seen people manage to figure it out through some wizardry, tech wizardry on their own. But again, it's really about making sure that we actually have a consistent performance that is acceptable for that hardware. I know that talking to Callum from Oculus a couple of years back, they were very concerned about a solid 60, and I think it could be entirely possible now that we have the new DirectX renderer out and we've seen the performance we have, but it would only be possible within a certain set of hardware. It would have to be probably the higher ends, you know, the 970s and up, and whatever the ATI or AMD equivalent is. I'm interested, but it really depends on how much time we have.
All right, thank you. Everyone check out ccc-labs.com.
And check out that thing.
So that guy seemed to kind of take out the wolves really fast.
Yeah.
Are the wolves actually like a big problem? Like, could they kill you quite easily, or is it hard to kind of be killed by these wolves?
Well, I think right now, keep in mind, he knew they were coming, and he had an assault rifle. But again, it's still fairly early. This is our first implementation of the AI, and I think it shouldn't be that hard for us, much like the infected, to balance everything from the damage they can take, the damage they do, to how aggressive they are. It's a matter of getting them out there right now, seeing how players interact with it, and then balancing from there. Obviously, we can. I mean, we've done it with infected to the point where players were very upset that they were OP. So I think first the focus should be getting it out there, seeing how players interact with it, and then seeing if we can bump it up. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, going back to your story about the 4 or 5 teenagers on Twitch,
Yeah.
who were pretty much shouting at each other.
It was hectic.
So, would you say you are striving to implement a sense of terror or fear in your players?
Yes, but I don't think the onus is on us to do that. It's creating a situation in which, how do I put this? Creating a situation in which there's a responsibility on the player side for, I'm trying to find the right word here, an awareness of cover, concealment, and a situational awareness at all times. To create a situation in which they should be concerned about surviving. And it's not just as simple as, can I find food? I mean, I was given a bit of shit about this on Reddit years ago, probably 2 years ago, in regards to a comment I said that the infected will never be the real threat in DayZ. And it's not that I'm saying that zombies couldn't be hard. Sure, we could turn them up and make them super bullet resistant, and it'd be a total pain in the ass. But that's not a threat. No AI is a threat. I mean, you are human beings. You will always figure a way around a programmed AI. Always. Well, I mean, sure, you could look at Terminator as an example of maybe not super successfully. But honestly, I have yet... I honestly, I don't hold out much faith within our lifetime, you know, unless the singularity happens, that that there will ever be an AI that can outthink a player, especially in a video game where you can just keep coming back and learning the ins and outs. But there's one thing that we can't create that we can provide as a threat to players that you will never be able to outthink. You can never honestly know what another person wants to. What are they thinking? You can never know what their plan is. You can never know how many there are or what secrets they hold. And that is the scary thing about DayZ, honestly. I mean, sure, the world, and you can put scary music in, and the weather can be horrible, but it's the other player that will always be the scariest thing in DayZ. And as long as we push the fact that the player has a responsibility of situational awareness because of other players, that is the hectic scenario that I'm looking to create. Sure, the zombies in that scenario, I talked about them running in and smacking them while they were fighting. That is stressful and that is scary, but it's only scary because they're worried that while they're looking at the zombie, that they're not paying attention to that other group of players, that the zombie's going to break their leg or something, and then they won't be able to fight back against the other player. You know, that's just my personal opinion. Granted, I think humans are so scarier than any AI. So
what you're saying is when you see a bunch of teenage boys getting hectic over like another team of players, you would consider it a success?
Oh yes, God yes.
So my question is mainly regarding the predators and all that stuff.
Hold on one sec. I just want to little caveat to that. Well, not a caveat, just a point at the end. They did come out on top. Now, I didn't see it. I was listening. But apparently they took down 12 people, lost all but 2 of theirs, got their gear back. I'm a little on the fence about getting your gear back after you die. And managed to exfiltrate out of the airfield. So they did good. And I did comment in their chat before I passed out that they entered as lads on a quest for banter and left as survivors battered and bruised. I thought that was a perfect description of what happened over the hour and a half they were there. Go for it.
All right. So in terms of predators, right? It's I guess it's really sort of like 2 questions.
Okay.
Really. Are there any plans to form an incentive to specifically hunt predators, or are predators more specifically just going to be another danger to be out in the wilderness? Like, for example, right? Like, would you ever want to purposely hunt a wolf for its pelt that could probably give your clothing an additional heat value? Additionally, would there be interactions between the infected and predators, and to what extent? The thing that comes to my mind immediately is that one time I was playing Skyrim, a bandit ambushed me,
Yeah.
and then out of nowhere, a wolf came and killed the bandit before I could kill the bandit. And would things like that happen?
I'll start with the first one, and remind me if I forget about the second one,
Okay.
because I tend to rant. On the first one, it's important to keep in mind that in addition to the tactical combat squad-based player that I've talked about before, there's a whole other aspect to DayZ that isn't maybe as entertaining to watch on Twitch, but that hermit style gameplay of somebody, it might be someone my age or older that doesn't want to deal with players. Maybe they just want to live off the land. They want to set up a camp. There's horticulture. There's tanning of hides right now in game. That is an area of gameplay that is a focus for us. It just doesn't get as much attention through the shareable stories and media and such, but that is very much a cornerstone of DayZ gameplay. And the responsibility is on us to drive that forward. So with wolves, I would say definitely. Probably not initially for 0.61. We might not have time to get those recipes put together and the assets, but I would say definitely. I don't think my lead designer Peter would let me get away with not having a resource from that corpse that you might drive for. I mean, we already have differences between the hides from cows and boars and so on and so forth, and a wolf hide. I mean, there's just so many cool things you could do with that, right? And maybe even the teeth. You could do something from the teeth. There's a lot we could do there, definitely. And I would say most definitely before 1.0, you're going to see Peter find a specific use for that wolf. That for those that follow that gameplay, they're going to want to track one down, or track a pack down, and manage to kill 1 or 2 before they run away. In regard to your second question, and that was specifically on AI versus AI, right? We already know we could do it. For those that recall when we first started spawning the cows back in, does anybody remember seeing cows being chased by zombies? It was kind of cartoonish, honestly, seeing a zombie chase this huge cow just going across the field in Electro. It's entirely technically possible, yes. And since we focus so much on trying to create a believable living world, sometimes more successful than others, but it's always a focus of ours, I would say definitely you should see in the situation, if it occurs, because wolves are probably going to want to stick mostly towards the rural areas, obviously, but when you run into them, if they happen to notice an infected before you, or most definitely they will run after deer and boars and chickens, I suppose, if they run up against a chicken, Do you guys play The Long Dark? It's a fantastic single-player survival game. And you see that all the time. You see the wolves in The Long Dark chasing down deer and rabbits and such, and sometimes you have to make the decision of, I might not have the ammo to kill the wolf, but I really need
the meat or the hides off of that rabbit or deer, so I'll just hang back, wait for this wolf to kill the deer, lose interest, and leave, and then go take the corpse. And that should also be part of the decisions that need to be made by that type of survivor I talked about earlier, that hermit survivor. Is, do I have the ammo? Do I want to make the noise another player might hear me? I might just watch this wolf kill this deer, wait, and then go in for the corpse.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, so I've got a two-part question, but they should be pretty simple, so they
Okay.
shouldn't take long. For me, DayZ is way more about like making stories and roleplay versus like PvP, which PvP is a big part of it. But I also love the stories and making a character and stuff. So for the first one, is there any character customization that'll be coming out in the future as far as like getting to choose what your guy looks like and hair, skin,
I gotcha.
etc. And then the second question, which is kind of like an in-game thing, because I'm sure bases are eventually coming and that sort of thing. Are you looking, and the team looking at more of a building from scratch, like cut down trees, mine rocks, kind of like a Rust-style base building, or more of a find boards and board up a house and kind of take over a small town or a block of Cherno or etc.?
Okay. For the first one, in regards to character creation, I hate being the bearer of bad news, but I don't think it's viable within the scope of the DayZ project to go that deep. That said, we are still working on increasing the amount of player heads that you can use, different heads. I know there's a bunch of the developers that are flagged to be in the game, in addition to some other people. Off the top of my head, I don't know the raw number on the count that we have. If you toss that question to me on the forums later on, I should be able to get that to you. But it's going to be limited to selecting your character head and of course its complexion, and then personally I'd like to we can increase the amount of selectable clothing variables at spawn, as long as we balance it out. You could see an example. I bitched to my lead designer until we got the canvas pants added, because I was like, well, why not? They're the same cargo capacity as blue jeans. Let's just add them in as another option players can have on spawn. And there's some configurations and combinations within that area that we could set to allow a little more uniqueness on spawn. But as far as character creation, you'll probably never see like face manipulation or hair or that kind of stuff. For us, it's all about the head you use, the clothes you spawn in, and then later on the customization comes in growing your character, right? We're looking at soft skills later on, which are skills that are not affected by the player skill. I guess an example for soft skills, I've talked about this a bit before, but an example for soft skills off the cuff would be the success fail on bandaging or transfusing blood, repairing a weapon, that kind of stuff. There's no real player skill involved in that right now, right? You grab the tool, you drag it on, it's a success. And expanding the value of the player character, the player, or the character I should say, itself separated from its gear, has been something we've been concerned about for a long time. Like, how do you keep people playing once they've lost their favorite weapon but they're still alive? How do you keep somebody going after they've been handcuffed and their stuff taken? Well, the value on the character is huge for us. And then that goes as well into, we're working on facial hair for male characters, right? And trying to figure out a way in which we can have maybe some decals to the characters, such some weathering for all genders. But yeah, it's about the growth past the spawn for us on your customization. The second one was base building. Base building is an interesting subject for DayZ. So when we started, our focus really was we have to be at least as good as the mod and a little bit deeper, right? And for a lot, myself included, a lot of times I look back at the mod with kind of rose-tinted lenses, thinking that it had so much more than it did, but it didn't. It only had a couple small options for your base. You got your barbed wire, your tank traps, your sandbags, and your pup tent. That's it. Yeah. Oh, and vehicles, obviously. That was base building in the mod, and I had a great time with it. So our focus initially was just let's look at what that mechanic was, and let's increase the options. So we have multiple types of tents, right? We have our civilian tent, we have our car tent, we have our military tent, we have barrels, we have the protector cases and ammo cases. And initially, I thought that was going to be enough. And there was additional options as far as, you can make plots for farming, you can use barrels for tanning, for fireplaces, and later on I'm hoping for catching water. You could make different levels of the fireplace, right? So you could have the small fireplace, you could make it to a reinforced fireplace. There's like an actual oven that you could make out of like a ton of rocks. And that was a natural evolution from the mod. But the more we thought about it, and there was a lot of internal debate about this, because I didn't want to see DayZ become, and I apologize for those that enjoyed these mods, but like sky bases, like Epoch and Overpoch and so on and so forth, the variations of the DayZ mod. It didn't look good. I really didn't think it looked good. I think it was a mod. It looked good for a mod, right? This isn't a mod. People paid for this. It should look believable. And it was a matter of finding what we could do within that space. I know that I had a lot of arguments with Peter, our lead designer, early on, because I didn't want to see the same repeated textures, a wooden wall and a wooden ceiling and a wooden floor. I mean, it might work for other games, but I didn't feel it worked for DayZ, and I felt it looked ugly, and I wanted it to be believable. No matter what we did, I wanted it, when you saw it, to believe it. Like, this is where someone lives. And I was within the last year, we've sat down and talked about that more after seeing some of the quality of the additional expanding upon that we wanted to do, which we looked at doing HESCO barriers and kind of handmade fences and such you could put around your bases. And when we started seeing those art assets come out of the team, I sat down with Peter and I said, Peter, I think you were right. I was wrong. The quality that we're putting out here, it doesn't look, it's not too repeated. It looks organic, and I think we can do this. So Peter and his team started working on things like watchtowers, expanding things like generators and floodlights, and that's going to be a focus for us. There's within 1.0, we're looking to expand upon we have our tents, right? So we're looking at being able for players to make stashes, like wooden chests that they can put things in and store things in addition to tents. We have the walls coming in, the HESCO barriers, which if you've seen the Northwest Airfield, those big concrete rock-filled barriers or HESCO barriers. Looking at the watchtowers players can craft, so that you can start to put the walls around your tents and your cargo like your barrels, your protector cases, your stashes, your vehicles. Wall it off, put watchtowers on the side, maybe generators for floodlights. And we can start to actually have an organic feel for a base, and that was really, to this day, has been the holy grail, I think, for base building in DayZ. Sure, we could do it, quick and dirty, and allow for that kind of repeated, all bases look the same thing. But I wanted something that looked like it felt like it belonged in Chernarus. And as far as gathering resources, you did ask about that. We're looking at kind of a node and tree and rock and such gathering to a degree. Obviously, you get your pickaxe, you find the rocks, you mine the rocks you use to make your fireplaces and your ovens. For some of the sheds and the watchtowers, it's about getting wood from resource nodes. I think that's where we last left off on design. Man, I'm having it's not. Help me out here, somebody. Sheets of plywood. I've had no coffee this morning. Sheets of plywood for some of those structures, and of course, wood from trees and such. Not so much to the way Rust does things, but something to the degree of allowing you to know what you need to make this thing, and making the steps of it visible. When we get to that point, when we get to the milestone goals that include base building, and we start working on those iterations, then we'll start showing them on our YouTube channel and in the status report, so people can see how they're shaping up to be.
My particular question is more based around the aiming down, like the iron sights.
Yeah.
Like for instance, hip fire, when you move side to side or aim side to side, the gun sways, which is understandable. But when you aim down the iron sights, it still doesn't follow your cursor all the way. Is that, like, for instance, like if you're trying to, you kill one zombie here,
Yeah.
and you're aiming to the right, as you quickly move over, your gun kind of follows the cursor.
Yeah.
Is that going to be more? Is that going to be changed or anything for aiming down sights? Because I don't mind it as a hip fire type, because that kind of feels like more real. But I feel I struggle aiming down the sights because of that sway.
Well, the way it functions right now is mostly a matter of the designers trying to experiment with and balance weight and dexterity on both the character's gear and the weapon itself. When we move to the new animation system and player control, there's a lot of changes that are going to need to happen, including, without going into too much detail, including a change on how that whole method is controlled, like the space bar to raise weapon and such. Like all that has to be rethought and redone in a more fluid way than the old system. Everything from, as much as a lot of people like to voice their discontent, to politely put it, when it comes to weapon sway and breath, to just the dexterity of the weapon, requires and is going to need balancing. It's going to need a lot of experimenting on our end on the stable and experimental branches, and that's not going to be able to come until the new player controller and animation system is present. It's an absolute waste of time for us to do it on the old system. It would just require, it would require pulling designers and animators off creating that old system to change it for the legacy, which is not something that I ascribe to. I mean, time is money, and people are impatient, in general. Just it's human nature. So the focus is really getting that new system and everything tied into it ready. And then we can look at making those changes once that's there.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, do y'all have like a GoFundMe or is it like a Patreon?
No. As much as I appreciate the implication of additional support, we're not a crowdfunded title. We had our money to make DayZ before we hit early access, and we're not going to be asking for any more.
Okay, yeah, that's all I wanted to ask. And yeah, thanks for making the game.
Oh,
Y'all
thanks
doing
for playing it,
Great
man.
job doing it.
Thank
so
you.
thanks.
You guys are too kind. My mom's going to love this. I know she's watching.
Just a quick one. How close are you to a one?
1.0? I know it was our intent. It was definitely a goal to hit 1.0 this year, and it would have been fantastic to just put a cap right at 3 years. I don't think we're too far off past that point. We're probably going to end up adding a couple extra months past that. But again, we projected 2.5 to 3 years in principal development a couple years back, and I think we're still very close to that. Come December, which would be our 3-year anniversary, I think we're going to be very close. And I think we should, I hope, to be in beta at a point in which that's all of our major tech changes, and it's a matter of adding content and polishing bugs. And it should just be a matter of months at that point. Honestly, I think we're very close. Maybe it seems a little closer for me because time just seems to scream by. It seems to me right now that December is I'll go to bed and it'll be December. But I honestly think we're getting a hell of a lot closer. We're definitely going to add some months, but only months, I think.
Well, thank you. One more quick question, just
Yeah.
to kind of spin off that. How do you keep updates seem few and far between? So how do you keep players intrigued, whereas they can go to another game that gets updated, sort of like kind of H1Z1, they kind of get weekly updates.
Yeah.
So how do you keep players kind of intrigued on that?
Well, I'm going to get some shit for this one, but I don't think I need to, honestly. We're here on Steam Early Access so people can participate in development. Honestly, I know a lot of people have got angry about me saying this, but I don't think my concern at all should be about popularity during early access. My focus is what DayZ is when it's done, and making sure that when that hits, That's when we pull out the stops. That's when we start. We get a hold of Steam and we say, "Hey, let's do a takeover." That's when we start sending press releases out and actually marketing, because we don't really do much marketing. This kind of stuff right here is the limit of our marketing. I come and I talk to people about DayZ. Honestly, I mean, if the update's running long in the tooth, if you're not enjoying yourself, you're frustrated, play other games, dude. I do. Like, we're all. Well, I could say we're all here because we're gamers, but I mean, it's implied that we're here for Rooster Teeth, video games. But you get my point. Like, you're playing DayZ because you're a gamer. You like video games. There are fantastic games out there in early access and out of early access, within the same space and outside the same space. I'm going to take a second here and mention a title called Miscreated. They just recently updated to 36 on their stable branch from their experimental. It's a fantastic game in a very similar space to DayZ, but play it. Like, go play it. Go have fun. I think, in addition to seeing these other titles go out there and then what they do and collaborative inspiration from developers, because the H1 guys, they're friends of mine. The Miscreated guys, they're friends of mine. Gary Newman, as much shit as we give each other on Twitter, he's a very close friend of mine, and I fucking love Rust. That is an amazing game. Like, you can't know if what we're doing is right if you're not checking out other games. I certainly can't. There's been plenty of times where there's another game that we just shamelessly, but with permission, stole a lot of mechanics from, Project Zomboid. If you guys haven't picked that up, it's definitely a hardcore game, Project Zomboid, but shit, that is amazing. It's probably the best post-apocalypse, post-zombie apocalypse title out there, honestly. It's fantastic. Any more?
What does a finished DayZ look like?
That's a good question, actually. A finished DayZ. I would say a finished DayZ looks like the implementation of all the major tech changes from Infusion. So moving over to Infusion, getting rid of all of our old real virtuality stuff. So that means, that means audio, that means player control, it means animation system, that means completion of the central loot economy, major bug fixes into a playable point of desynchronization and handling that gracefully. It looks like aerial vehicles, sea-based vehicles, both fixed-wing and rotor blade. It looks like an enjoyable and fluid experience in said vehicles. Obviously, we can't. I can't say that every server out there is going to perform wonderfully in every network condition, but in ideal network conditions and at a server at capacity, it looks like. Trying to eloquently put this. It looks like you spawn in on the beach as a new player, and you're struggling to find food, but you're seeing crazy things happening around you at all times. There's zombies in this town, and you don't know how to avoid them, so you're crawling, and then you notice that there's a UI element down below, very minimalistic, that indicates to you what your sound is. So you think about, oh, well, I realize that if I'm crouched and running across the grass, I'm making less noise than running across the pavement. It looks like figuring these out through cues in the world. It looks like it's hard enough that you don't know what the fuck is going on, but easy enough to understand that as you play, you start to understand. It looks like the farther you go inland, the more the world opens up to you, and you realize it's not just about finding a gun. It might be about making a base and sharing that with your friends. It entails seeing a vehicle and going, I didn't even realize there were cars in this. We could find a car and fix it up and run around the map. It is an evolving experience. For me, a finished DayZ is a living, breathing world in which you spawn in and the experience you have is different every time you play, even if you mean to do the same thing. I hope that answers your question. Okay. Any more? Got some around here?
Okay. This is about the wolves.
Yeah.
And will they be tameable at any point?
I knew somebody was going to ask that. You know, I can't honestly give you an answer on that one. We want to do companion animals, but that's so far down my current focus. I don't know. I honestly don't know. We've talked about horses before, and we've talked about companion dogs. But at this point, we're just not talking about it at this point. It's something we've talked about wanting to do, but I don't know. Keep in mind, though, that I'm speaking in terms between now and 1.0. Bohemia Interactive, granted I'm not the CEO, but the CEO's told me this, is committed to, at a very minimum, 5 years of development past 1.0 of additions to the game, DLC, expansions, whatever the case may be, new stuff coming out. And keep in mind that, probably shouldn't even say that Mark's going to kill me. Since DayZ's a little bit different than Arma, right? It's a service-based title. It's an encapsulated world, whereas Arma, you know, it's a military simulator. It's per game session. It's not necessarily a service. So anything we do in DayZ, it has to be done as far as additional content. It has to be done in a way that doesn't break the base game. So I expect, hopefully, a lot of additions to DayZ after 1.0, new builds and patches that don't follow the traditional you have to buy this model. Bohemia has always been very, in my experience as a consumer, Bohemia has always been very soft touch on that kind of stuff, and meaning that you don't see, like, you know, a day one DLC that's, you know, $40, a couple new maps. Like when Bohemia puts out new content that they actually will ask money for, it's significant. I mean, look at Apex for Christ's sake, the new Arma update. That I was screwing around last night in Tanoa, the new terrain. It's insane. I think this is the best terrain that Bohemia has put out since Chernarus itself originally hit Arma 2. It's fantastic. So I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but what I mean to say is, just because I'm hesitant to talk about it in relation to 1.0 doesn't mean it can't happen. We've talked about wanting to do it. It's just a matter of when. Questions? There you go.
This is going to be the last question.
Hey, I was going to say, I have no scope of time right now.
There's one over here.
Is it all right if after the last question I show them like a 60-second video? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
Going back to the zombies versus wolves,
Yeah.
could we see where if a zombie ends up getting taken down by the wolves, but he enters another one, the wolves becoming zombified in any?
See, herein lies the issue.
fashion?
Herein lies the issue. And a lot of times people cry bullshit when I say this, but and this is why I say infected. Occasionally I'll slip up and say zombie just because it's said so commonly, but a zombie has a certain connotation to it, right? A zombie is undead. A zombie is, you know, whether it be slow or fast, it has risen from the grave. But that's never been the case with DayZ. Our zombies, you have to think more along the lines of 28 Days Later, like the Rage virus. They're not dead, and that's why it's much, you don't need headshots to kill them. They're living people infected with this virus that just completely consumes them, and they're not capable of higher thought. I never bothered to sit down and talk to Dean about whether or not this was transmissible between species. Dean's brother is a virologist, so I could ask him about it. But I'm going to say out the gate, I don't think that's within our plans. But I should probably know, honestly. So I think I'll actually have to talk to Dean about this and see if his brother can get back to us. Because the initial design was whether or not it was transmissible between players and how it was transmissible between players, because the players are supposed to be immune. That's why they're not turning into the infected. But as we looked at, I'm going off on a tangent here, but as we looked at the contaminated terrain, I think I talked about that at TwitchCon. They kind of all blend together. But I talked about contaminated terrain, specifically the TC area, when it's finished, being an area that you need some kind of protective gear to go into because of the sheer disease risk amongst the dead infected bodies. So there is something to be said about the virus having an effect on players, but it's not like It's not turning them into zombies, and they're never going to raise from the dead because they're not undead. I hope that answered your question. Okay. All right. I guess that was the last question, but I told you guys there were more videos of the dev Yosef with the wolves, and I'll go ahead and show one of them. Wolves. There's a pistol one. I didn't want to show this because he doesn't use the quick bar to reload, and that drives me crazy. He goes into his inventory. But I'll go ahead and pull this up. I believe this is a revolver. Yeah. Is this muted? Let me unmute this for you. Well, we'll know in a second if it's playing audio. Yeah, but check this out, dude. Oh, this? For the love of God, I used to work at Microsoft. What am I clicking? This right here? It's amazing. Okay. This right here. Holy shit. Who designed this? I'm serious. I worked for Microsoft for 5 years. All right, let's start that over. Personally, I get really excited when I see the retreat mentality of the wolves after they start losing numbers and they just nope out. I thought that was pretty fantastic. That's what I was talking about. Use your quick bar, Joseph. Well, seriously, he's a good guy. He rushed to put this together for me, so I can't give him too much shit. But yeah, you can see that. But looking at the wolves, obviously the AI is it's an early iteration. We're going to have to work on it to get it better, but. The actual damage the wolf has done, since this is a very early implementation, it's not very visible to you. You couldn't see damage being applied to the player. But I think it remains to be seen how effective they will be in combat. But I think that the gentleman had the question about wolves. Balancing is really a matter of putting it out there, seeing how you guys play with it, and then tweaking it from there, trying to make it a real threat. But, yeah, I'm probably being ushered out. So thank you, everyone, for coming out, listening to me ramble on about DayZ. And I can't wait to see .61 hit experimental and see how all those new gunshots sound and the wolves and everything. I mean, I'm excited. But then again, I played 6,000 hours of DayZ, so.
I'll take the million. Oh, man, I'm getting...